Amen.
I want to thank you for the opportunity to stand before you. You as parents are probably, I mean, you look wonderful, but you definitely don't look what I know you've been through. And that's a blessing, because I know that the work that you do in raising children, period, let alone children who have challenges, can be difficult. And you come and you show up and you advocate for your child, and you know, it's just a blessing. Your child is blessed to have you, and so I want to commend you on your work as parents. My name is Jeffrey Coles. I don't have a PhD, although some people say I do. I don't. My background is in actually human resources. I went to school at Georgetown College and graduated with an undergraduate degree in religion and philosophy, which opens up the world for jobs. So I worked at Kentucky State University in the financial aid department with that degree. And while I was there, I worked on a master's in public administration. And during those days, Toyota was just opening. And so I was doing a research paper on assessment centers where they evaluate people for employment. And Toyota was the closest assessment center, so I got a job there. I actually asked them, could I observe their assessment center? They had me do it for a month, and they hired me when I graduated. And so I worked for 12 years at Toyota. I had a beautiful Toyota wife and a beautiful Toyota home, 2 beautiful Toyota children, and a Toyota dog. And I just was not fulfilled. I felt like there's got to be more to life than that. And I went to my boss at Toyota and I told him, I said, listen, you know, I don't know, you might walk me out the door when I get done with this, but I just am not fulfilled. I cannot see myself return from here. And I'm thinking he's going to say, okay, well, you know, there's a whole line of people waiting for your job, so. But he introduced me to a fellow by the name of Mike Hoseas, who was a general manager at Toyota, having the same feeling. Mike left that year that we were introduced and went to Florida to open up a boys' home. And I continued to work in misery. I mean, I don't know how to describe it, except, you know, you're working, you're making everything, so there's nothing wrong, but, you know, I'm not happy. And so at the same time, by the time Mike came back, which was 2 years later from Florida, he sat down, well, he and I went out to San Diego, California. We took our wives and we went to San Diego to hear from a futurist. And the futurist is talking about what the future looks like in manufacturing and what the workforce looks like. And it called for a more diverse workforce. It called for a more utilizing people who you typically would not expect to be working in the workforce. And so we sat around a table and created a company called nonprofit company called the Center for Quality People and Organizations. His role was to work with manufacturers and their suppliers, large manufacturers and their suppliers. My role was to work with schools and communities. So I had the job of working with principals and superintendents who were having issues in accomplishing the goals set by the accountability models. During those days it was CARA, and then later followed by No Child Left Behind. Education, elementary and secondary education act, and now it's the ESSA, which will begin next year. So I was working with them to develop a problem-solving approach to incrementally improving their student body. And a fellow who was then a principal, after doing that for some 6 years, said to me, well, if this great thing works so wonderfully in terms of problem solving and continuous improvement, if it works so wonderfully, why don't you come to my school and do it? And this guy had a school here in Lexington. He was the head of the Lexington Traditional Magnet School. And it had just been, it's initiated as a magnet school, but the city had just, or the school board had just decided to make the school be magnet and include the kids in the community. And the kids in the community were not, for the most part, magnet kids. And so, and the teachers, I might say, were not wanting or ready to teach kids who were not magnet kids. And the parents were not ready to send their kids to a school who was not ready to teach kids who are not magnet kids. So the principal had a real dilemma on his hands, and he called me in, and there was issues. And the primary issues were, you had these kids who were catered to and were given provision, and then you had these kids who were not. And I created very quickly a group among the kids, of the worst kids, called the leadership group. And we developed a process whereby these kids could learn leadership skills, demonstrate leadership in the school, and what have you. Make a long story short, we bridged the gap in terms of suspensions. We reduced them by 60%. And we met with parents, well, anyway, the gentleman said, well, you probably need to get a teacher's certificate so you can teach. And the last thing I wanted to do was teach, but it was such a magnetic, such a dynamic relationship with these people who were considered the have-nots that I did it, and I got a master's in special education. And I taught there for 5 years, special education. During the 5 years, I had inevitably in any given year 2 to 4 students who had autism. So the principal went on to be assistant superintendent in Paris Independent. He then went to Scott County. The principal that replaced him went on to Paris Independent to be assistant to the superintendent. And I was at that point ready to demonstrate my skills and ability on a larger level. So I applied to the Kentucky Department of Education. Make a long story short, which is too late to be short now. Department of Education, and I was working with the teacher effectiveness, because some of the issues that students face are student issues, but some of the issues that students face we recognize are teacher issues as well, in school and building issues. And so I think all of us need to work together. I mean, a teacher is never too well taught to learn, as well as a student is always able to learn as well, and I think all students are able to learn. So I went work with the teacher effectiveness, providing student voice, where we went to accomplish 80% of the teachers had on their effectiveness process students' feedback as to how they were doing as teachers from a student perspective. And so that was a major accomplishment, because that was met with a little resistance. However, students were able to let a teacher know if they're getting through or not. And after that 80%, I considered that full fidelity. I moved over to the Division of Learning Services. So I currently am in the Division of Learning Services. This will be the second year, my second year in Division of Learning Services. And one of my roles is the district resource for autism. Now, what I've learned been to many conferences, and I've been to many trainings, and I've observed, and I've learned that there's places where wonderful things are going on with students with autism, and then there's places where, man, I can't believe that we're calling this public education, but we're working to change that. And so what I saw when I came to the division is that there was no, I guess the most recent, the most up-to-date information on the web page at Kentucky Department of Education was 1997 regarding autism. And I said, well, you know, how can we best provide support to districts? And one of the ways that we are attempting to provide support is to, number one, support the mission of KDE, and that is to prepare all Kentucky students for next generation learning, work, and citizenship by engaging schools, districts, and communities through excellent leadership, service, and support. And so what we found is that there are schools and districts who are eager to do what is right by all children, just simply don't have the support and resources, and that's a big mountain. And the work that we're doing is just one little bite in the big chunk of work that needs to be and will be done. What we saw was that the Division of Learning Services was a challenge to provide the most current resources regarding all disabilities recognized by the IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities in Education. Now, currently, we have no system for assuring the most current autism resources are available for districts and partners. And so we created the goal to increase KDE's support of district and partners by developing an autism guidance manual and an autism webpage on the KDE website. If you look today, you will not see a web page for autism. The reason it isn't just automatically put up there is we wanted to make sure that we had statewide, research-based, real credible information in providing this resource to the districts. And so we embarked upon first creating an autism guidance document. And so we felt that by incorporating an autism guidance document in the autism webpage that districts and partners will have the needed support with the most current autism information. And that was key because, you know, you would be amazed at what's, maybe you wouldn't, maybe you know, but I was amazed to see some of the things that are occurring. However, those things are changing and things are getting better. There is a light at the end of the proverbial tunnel. So we put together an autism manual work group which consists of people from KDE. We have individuals who are leaders in the special education co-op. They go, some years ago, I'm going to say the grant ended last year. There was a grant provided by North Carolina for states who were granted to provide research-based interventions. And we set up a system of cadres in the state of Kentucky to work alongside the co-ops to go into schools and work specifically on issues and intervention processes as it pertains to students with autism. So that grant ended last year. However, the work continues through the Kentucky Autism Training Center, which is led by Larry Taylor, and you all may be familiar with him, but he probably has the most holistic and centralized body of support and resources for autism in this region. We have people from the cabinet for health and family services. We have parents represented. We have people from schools. We have professors and teacher from the University of Louisville, and Amy, who leads the Kentucky Advisory Council on Autism, all sit in the room once a month and knock heads to present this, to put together this document. And what we would like to do is once that the document is pretty much put together, but not ready to present, because what we would like is just some regular eyes to look at it and say, listen, you put all those eggheads in the room, and they came up with this great, wonderful technical document, and we don't know a word it says. So we want some other people to take a look at it and feed back to us and let us know, you know, how it is transmitting as we communicate it. Some of the topics covered in the document is the autism definition, and you know the autism definition has evolved. And so there's a spectrum today that, you know, did not exist in the past or did not exist in the way that it is today. You know, there are students on the spectrum. Some were considered Asperger's, some were considered, you know, having different designation. But then there's gaps in between that, you know, what we found is that when you've met a person with autism, you've met a person with autism, and this, you know, his or her strengths and weaknesses may vary. There's the referral process. Districts were having trouble determining how the referral process worked. They were, you know, if a student, for example, is diagnosed medically with autism, that does not mean for the state of Kentucky that student is automatically receive special education service. I'm sure if you have a 19-year-old child, then you know that. But many parents and even some schools were a little confused as to, you know, what makes that. Some schools were waiting for a diagnosis from a doctor because for fear of diagnosing when it's not a school's place to diagnose a student that's having autism. The student can only determine a district can only determine a student eligible for services, but cannot diagnose. So knowing the difference between a medical and a medical diagnosis and school or school-based eligibility, we kind of had a conversation about that in the manual. We also talked about the evaluation process, what needs to occur, what is essential and what is not essential for evaluation, determining eligibility, what should be in the individual education program. You know, sometimes there can be instances where the student's disability, being autism, and there are goals that are placed in the individual education program that does not relate to what the student's disability is. So making sure that there's a smooth continuity between those, what the student's circumstance, weakness, or strength is, and what the student's goals are. Those kinds of things teachers need, or school-based people needed guidance for that. And then continual placement. What is the best placement? Sometimes the regular ed room is the appropriate placement for a student, even if he or she has autism. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it is something more more restrictive. And then evidence-based practices. There's a whole lot of practices out there. I went to the National Autism Conference last year out in Clearwater, Florida. And, you know, there's a whole lot of things that people are offering for students who have been diagnosed with autism. Some of the things are evidence-based, but some of them are simply money makers. And, you know, we need to know the difference. some people are convinced by the salesmanship of the person who is providing the services. We want our child to be helped. We want our child to be strengthened. We want our child to have the support that he or she needs. However, we want it so badly, we're willing to, listen to Joe Schmo here, who says by, holding his arms straight and flopping, or not flopping, whatever his thing is, that's a solution. And the reality is it or not, and what evidence do you have, what research do you have to support it? And if it's not yet research-based, then we won't support that, even though it's a fad for right now. Our craze, our people are wanting to do that. Problem solving. There's a whole section in there regarding problem solving, how we address issues regarding whether it's a school issue or a student issue, and what processes we can go through to make sure that the student is the recipient of the best service and support. And then there's the best piece, and this piece was supported by the parent, one of the parents on. So there's a frequently asked question, because there's a lot of things that we don't cover, or parents need to know. And we have a lady who actually works at the University of Kentucky and has a son who is on the spectrum, who is helping with providing support for the frequently asked questions. So, we will be attending the CEC conference. You all ever attend the CEC conference, anybody? In Louisville? That is a conference that provides a whole lot of information around special education, not just autism, but there are some autism breakout sessions regarding parents' needs, advocacy,
So what is it again? What does that stand for?
The CEC stands for
CEC?
Council on Education.
Exceptional children.
Exceptional.
Yeah, that's right. I think they used to say
That's November in Louisville. CEC, Council on Exceptional Children.
There's a couple of UK faculty that in the special ed department that are presenting. There's the autism.
There's an autism arm, right?
Yeah. So.
And then there's a big advocacy piece, and you all provide advocacy. I mean, some people could learn from what you all do in the way of advocacy. So what we will do is, we will be, our last meeting of the work group will be in November at the CEC conference, and we will have the final document there, not for dissemination, but just to sign off and say, okay, we're ready to get some other eyes to look at this document and to feed back to us, their perception of what we're communicating, because we think we're communicating one thing, and the feedback is very valuable in terms of what we're actually disseminating. So we will submit a draft autism resource document to KDE. Even when we finish that document, KDE will have to approve that document. We'll submit it to KDE, and their leadership will sit around the room and look at it, and what they will say is, yes, we can say this, but no, we can't say that, and yet, they will critique it. Because what the document is it's their document. It's communicating their effort to provide support to districts. And what we don't want to do is overstep what we can actually understep what we can actually provide, the services and support. So at any rate, we plan to have the web page up and approved by January of next year. So that's our process for that. Some key features in this document I found that I thought personally, and you'll probably see others, you might have questions that can lead us to other key features. That this document includes the most recent research-based interventions, and you know, interventions are being researched almost daily, and you know, to not have information since 1997 is really hard pill to swallow. And so what we'd like to do is to continuously improve or continuously update this webpage and this document. So this is not a one-time deal, this is a continuous document. This document is a part of the council, Autism Council's subcommittee for student, school-age children. So the school-age children subcommittee of the state's Council on Autism is also using this document as its work. So when you hear Rob Pennington's report at the Council on Autism, then much of his report is the work that we're doing that's coming out of KDE for school-age children. There is, and it's really basically focused toward districts. We wanted to include a real-life case scenario. Of course, you know, changing the names to protect the innocent, but to provide a real-life case scenario for schools to observe and review so that they can see from a practical perspective how to respond to issues that a student might have and in terms of referral, in terms of evaluation, in terms of developing the individual education program, and what it looks like in a classroom providing intervention. Well, here's my good friend Evelyn Maples. Hi, Evelyn. That's Wendy.
That's my name.
Is that your name?
That's what Jeff used to call me. We went to high school.
Wow.
So as I asked him, whose name is that? And you
And I
don't
said,
know.
yours.
No.
It's nice.
And we will provide everything that we document in this document also is accompanied by the state's Kentucky Administrative Regulation, which is the legal aspect. There are some things we would like to do, there's some things we must do, and those things are articulated in the Kentucky Administrative Regulation. So that's the nature of what I am presenting. This document is going, what I don't have in the document is any statistics. We started with statistics. There's, you know, real global statistics about autism in general. But because that is so dynamic in the state and it's measured differently, well, there's a lot of explanation that needs to accompany any measurement of statistics. And it's one thing to say a thing, but unless you have the understanding of how the data was gathered and how and when and what went into gathering the process that it took to gather the data, we didn't want to include any of that. However, we do have people who are specialists in some of the data, particularly as it pertains to students with autism, who we can have come out or ask to come out to provide specific explanation. But it gets real technical. A lot of times what we think we're looking at in terms of statistics are not. It needs an explanation. So at this point, everybody claps and says, how wonderful you did. And I'm doing that for the camera. And I'm willing to entertain any questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
It sounds like you and a lot of people have done a lot of work on this. And this is not exactly related to this, but I'm wondering what percentage of the budget for education went toward this project?
The bud,
I'm thinking
my
it's
quick
not
answer-
enough,
My
right?
quick answer is, the budget for education is a big number. Here we go.
Right, it's a big number,
So the percentage of budget that went to this is
probably really small,
Really
right?
small,
Really
right.
small. I think that's
right.
My
Yes.
question, my question relates to, in the document, as we
Mhm.
look at this, are there any provisions for how you're going to evaluate and monitor whether or not policies are being met or people are actually?
Actually, I'm glad you asked that question because actually there are, now what we do have in place because of the Office of Special Education from the federal government requires us to monitor and to evaluate the degree to which policies and processes are implemented with fidelity throughout the districts. And we do that yearly. And, you know, some districts do receive corrective action based on, you know, their delivery of services from a policy perspective. Yeah, so we don't, this document won't speak to that because we do that from, I tell you who has a real big conversation about that is the State Advisory Panel for Special Education. And they meet, they have representatives from different offices throughout the state, and many of the representatives have children who have disabilities, some of which is autism. But yeah, the monitoring is I probably do that more than I do anything. I do that way more than I do this. Monitoring, we go, well, we select school districts that we go into, and we look at everything from the development of the individual education programs, overrepresentation, the certification of teachers providing services, that kind of thing. Yes, ma'am.
I have two questions. I just wanted to know how many parents actually were on the committee
On this committee,
that actually.
Well,
were manual?
there's actually 2 parents that are not
Like on anything else?
that are not on anything else, right? There's
Not
2
on a university,
right.
they're just a parent.
there's 2 parents that are not on anything else.
Okay, and have you all thought about submitting the manual to like just like support groups for autism? Like, just to let them look at it?
We have, and 2 camps speak up on that. One camp says, well, the support group are looking for a document that can help their constituency. Is this that document? Larry Taylor presents because his outfit at the Kentucky Autism Training Center has a more holistic, beyond the educational realm, has a holistic approach to guidance. So he's going to talk to issues that parents may have. He's going to talk to issues that, you know, parents may have with Medicaid, or parents may have with Michelle P. Waiver, or parents may have with school. But we're going to, what this document is more narrowly focused on is because, I mean, and you all know this because you've had to raise children in school districts. But what many people don't realize is some districts don't know specifically what to do and what is the best approach. And so they're doing the best they can, but you know, some of them are some of them may be waiting for, you know, a medical diagnosis before they can make a kid eligible. Well, they need to know that you don't need a medical diagnosis to make a child eligible for services. You know, so this is primarily primarily to provide support for that district that, has 10 kids in the whole district with autism and really are doing the best they can to provide services but don't have the support, don't know the best, right.
So,
Yes, ma'am.
yeah, because when you're saying it's for the district level, who do you envision, like, reading the manual and using it?
I envision, the person who is responsible for sitting around the ARC committee, the annual review and release committee. So who is sitting around there? There's going to be a guidance counselor sitting around there. There's going to be a principal sitting around there. There's going to be a special ed teacher. There may be a regular ed teacher. There is going to be, people who are invited in through the parents' concern or constituency, the parent support. So I'm thinking that they're going to look at this document and say, this is what we should be doing. Because otherwise, they're just everybody's trying to figure it out, but there's no guidance. And what we're trying to do is say, listen, this is what you should be doing. This is the way you should be doing referral. If a parent says, I think my child has autism, then, you shouldn't be doing all this other stuff. You should be responding to that with calling a meeting to do an evaluation. I mean, anything other in excess of that is not appropriate. And so what we're trying to do is provide streamlined guidance for school level support and parents, because the parents are going to read it and say, listen, this is what I'm understanding you should be doing, and you're not doing it. And so everyone can be held accountable to what the expectation is.
So the parent would be able to see
Sure.
the manual as well?
Sure.
And how would they get that? Is that all going to be on the web, or-
We will create an autism website which will have all kinds of information around autism, but we will also have the autism guidance document on the web, a link to it on the website, so you can click it and print it out, or share it at your meetings, or call us in and say, hey, you said you was going to do this, and why are you doing this? And as I say, it's a living document, and so it's not something we're going to set out there and just hope. It's a living document. It'll change because the work will change around it. Wendy, you had a question?
Oh, I was gonna ask a question about fidelity. I'm sorry. I'm following, what Hazel was asking you about evaluating and monitoring where the policies are being implemented, and you were saying something about the federal government requiring.
Right. They require us to, we have to report to the.
Here's my question
Okay.
about fidelity. So, how do you assess whether an IEP is being implemented with fidelity? What in the records is going to tell you whether they're doing that right? Does everybody know what fidelity means when you're talking about an IEP? No, I'm serious, because it's
Agreement among all
Right.
parties?
I'm sorry?
Agreement among all parties?
No, fidelity is, you just want me to explain it, or? Okay, my understanding is, like, your IEP tells what the kid's supposed to, the services they're supposed to get, and the question is, are the people in the school doing it and actually following the instructions
And are they
implementing it
doing it,
correctly?
particularly with a research, when it's a research-based intervention, are they following the protocol for implementation of that intervention? I get what you're saying.
So I'm asking
So
because,
to the degree that we do that is, so for every goal that's in that individual education program, the school is responsible for what we call progress monitoring. When we go into evaluate or monitor a district, we are looking at the PLEP, and then I'm getting in the weeds, but we're looking at the present levels, and we're looking at the connectivity between the present levels and the goal. And then we're looking for the progress monitoring that associates itself with that goal. And so when we see that the student is progressing, if the student's doing well, then the issue doesn't surface. It's when the student's not doing well, when the student is not progressing, when the student is regressing in some cases. So what happens then? So what we're looking to see is that there was an evaluation done in the appropriate amount of time to determine whether or not that student is progressing, and if that student is regressing or not progressing, then there needs to be another meeting called, another ARC called, to provide another intervention in terms of that goal. But what we don't do is watch the teacher and say, we're watching to see if you're, hand over hand, if your hand over hand is correct. We don't do that. But we will look at the outcome of that teacher's work, and if the teacher, if the student is not progressing, then we will look for another ARC. And typically what happens is the student won't progress for the whole year. No ARC was called to identify another intervention. And so what we will cite that district on is the importance of having good progress monitoring, but also having a reassessment of the progress monitoring when we find that it's not working within an appropriate amount of time.
And I have two questions.
Okay.
So when you say not progressing, do you mean like not meeting the goals and objectives? I guess we're talking about the objectives, the short-term objectives as they're written, like, because let me give you an example.
Go ahead.
Many people here probably have been told, oh, well, she didn't quite meet the objective, but she's like halfway there or 2/3 of the way there, so she is making progress. So I'm just like, is that progress? Or do you mean progress on to the criteria and the objective?
So there is a long-term objective in the goal, and there's short-term, what we call benchmarks.
Yes.
And so our goal is to take a look at the progress monitoring to determine whether or not the students are meeting the benchmarks. So if they say, for example, well, they are progressing, well, great, we're happy. But where are we when we compare ourselves to the benchmark? So the benchmark typically are shorter goal or shorter objectives than the overall objective, which kind of scaffold themselves to sustain a major objective or a goal. So let's say we want the students to count to 2 by January the 1st, and count to 6 by April, and count to 9 by June. And it's January the 1st and the student is still at 1. And the goal is the student will be able to count to 10 by June. Well, if the student isn't on 2 by January 1st, then there needs to be a reevaluation of the interventions or the accommodations or the support that is provided to that student. So the incremental increases will tell us whether or not that student is progressing. Now, if the student, what we don't do is we don't look at the teacher's methodology, but we do look at the outcome. And our goal is to cite a district if the student isn't progressing in the appropriate time or in the time that you said that you set the goal. So when a parent understands that, and they tell the parent, well, he is progressing. Well, ma'am, it's April, and they're still counting to 1. What other intervention are we going to be implementing now? Oh, well, we just said since he progressed a little, he counted to 1.5. Then we'll just keep going. No, because that's not what we said we would do. Yes, ma'am.
Is effective instruction defined in the manual too? That's always,
Effective instruction is another manual.
Oh.
There is
No, you're so right. It's a whole-
right.
Sorry, I'm a little
base is about different methodologies is ABA.
Mhm.
That's been something that's been in the literature for, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know exactly the length of time, but is that something that's discussed?
Yeah, the ABA is discussed. We have, there's a section where we talk about the evaluation process for interventions and why these interventions are priority or primary. And then we talk about interventions that are current, that other people are, that may be suggested, and why they're not primary. And there's a whole section on interventions and why we are suggesting what we're suggesting. We talk about interventions that are close to being appropriate, but have not stood the test of time yet. So, but ABA is discussed and other interventions, yes ma'am.
So I get that you're talking about this at the individual level, at the child, what helps. But one of the big problems I see is that you have really good teachers in one area, you have brilliant teachers in another, and then you have those who are struggling.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all happening at maybe a school level.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we make sure that there is institutionalized effectiveness
Right. Now that's a,
at all the school levels across the board? Because
Right.
this is the whole of Kentucky.
now if
not-
I didn't work in the next generation professionals branch before I worked in the Division of Learning Services, I would be at a loss of words for it, because I understand the dilemma, but but the reality is there's a whole next generation professionals branch of Kentucky Department of Education who is dealing specifically with the problem that you are articulating. And that has to do with there's a disparity among teachers, among classrooms, and number one, how do we address the disparity? Well, first we have to identify the disparity. We have to identify, what teachers are effective. We know the methodologies that are effective, but what teachers are effective and where are they? So we have a whole equity branch that works with equitably distributing teachers to make sure that every student has an effective teacher. But we have a whole teacher professional growth and effectiveness system that helps us identify teachers who are effective and teachers who may new and emerging teachers who are not quite effective yet, and the professional learning that they need so that they can be disseminating effective education. And so we have this whole process set up to raise the bar, so to speak, of teacher effectiveness. Now, special education teachers are included in that group, but that's just not a special education problem. That's a public education issue, and it's a whole reason behind No Child Left Behind, and that's a bigger issue.
How many people were in the panel that developed the manual?
We typically plan for 24 people.
And how many are going to review the manual? Besides the, the Division of Education?
We haven't set a limit. We haven't set a limit.
So, how are they going to decide who gets to participate in the review?
Well, it was established informally. What we said was, okay, so we've got what we call ourselves having is what we call critical friends. People who know us and we're not threatened by their judgment. They tell me I have a spot on my face, then I trust Wendy, for example, tell me that I got a spot on my face. And not be taken, any kind of resentment for her saying it. I know that she wishes me well. And so I know that so we each have critical friends. And so we haven't set up a formal process for sharing, but we just said, well, we'll take it to our critical friends and see what they say, you know.
So that might not be that big of a pool of people reviewing it then?
Well, are you talking about 25 people letting somebody else look at it? So I don't know. It's not big when you're talking about the whole world, but
Well,
I mean,
the
it's,
scope of the children
Right.
that are gonna be impacted by the manual,
Mhm.
needs to have a scope of large review.
Like what? What would you think would be a ample? And what I'll do is I'll take it back to them and say, let's do that.
Well, I wouldn't be able to give you numbers, but right now, but I would think, definitely parents of special needs and
Mhm.
autistic.
I agree.
And when you were mentioning about someone didn't want to take it to, support groups for autistic people because of.
Well, because of the focus of the work. The work is, and I get what you're saying. So we do have a parent on the panel, but the focus of the work is toward the school and the district.
Right, the support groups for autism and everything, those parents and those people are going to be, very tuned into the latest methods that work, and they often have the
Great
hands-on
ideas,
experience
right.
of the children, and they're very much engaged in advocacy people for the welfare of all children of autism. So those types of groups would really be able to add to the review process. And also, like occupational therapists tend to be very skilled and tuned in with how to intervene with autistic children when they start to have meltdowns or when they start to have sensory processing issues in a classroom setting. So those people would be awesome to be part of the review.
So what we can do is, what I can do, because I can only operate in my realm of scope, but what I can do is, I can make sure Melanie gets a copy of it.
And I
I'll make 3,000.
yeah, you better watch out with Melanie.
I would like to
No,
add,
that'd be
though,
awesome.
it would be very beneficial to have a draft on a website and direct
For public?
parents to that and say, this is your time to review this because your children are going to be impacted by this directly. And so I know that would be some things that you would hesitate for that, but those are the people that are going to be impacted. And if we're advocating for those children, the parents and the children would have the best, should be part of the review process.
I think that you bring a good point, and what I will do is I will say to my group, this is what we need to consider. In what way are we assuring the public that we're putting enough eyes on this because of the scope of the disability
And also the
in
teachers
Kentucky?
of those that are going to be working with the autistic children, they should have the ability to be part of the review if they'd like to, because they're going to be impacted every day with this. Another thing, it seems like a very short time between when the draft will be distributed to when it'll become, official. And so I think it'd be best to lengthen the
Lengthen the
process.
time? Well, it might help to know that we've already been working on it for
Yeah.
over a year. So I mean,
Exactly.
the challenge we have is, and I get you. The more input,
Not necessarily more, like a bunch more, but just the ones that are going to be directly impacted to have an ability to be part of the process. They would feel a lot more, they would buy into
They
it
were
a lot
buying,
more.
right?
Yeah.
That's what the whole deal is about buying.
And on what she's talking about, so I know I'm sorry I was late, but I have have all these people at my house, so I can't
You
get away
have
from
no,
it.
you have no excuse.
What'd you say, I have what?
You have no excuse.
Well, yeah, I but anyway, I hear what you're saying is that this resource or whatever manual is gonna be focused toward policy. But the reason I think that you need to have, parents are part of the admissions and release committee
Right.
meetings, and parents need to be empowered to really understand the process. And many times, I mean, you have some of us here in this room, I can't speak for everybody, but some of us here in this room who, some people go to their meetings and they have no idea what's going on. If the school
Right.
system tells them you can't do that, then they go,
They
oh,
can.
okay.
Right.
Where there are some other people in this room where if the school system tells them you can't do that, they go, show me.
Right.
Show me in the book where it says you can't do that.
Right.
Show me the
And,
Yeah.
I mean, it's the truth.
Right.
And so that's why it's important for families to understand and know the information in your policy book, because they're gonna have to be utilizing it
Right.
when they go to their meetings for
Well-
when they're told wrong things and they have to say, show me in the book.
And the thing is we do want to make and we're not trying to keep the information from people. I think that it's important to know that the information will be presented, and it is a living document. And so if you do, when it does come out and you do see the, the information, and you think that it should be, it should include something else, well, I mean, okay, well, we will receive that as well and include your comment. The challenge comes in, and this is always going to be the challenge, and when you say, okay, we need something, it's been 1997 and we don't have anything. When you say, okay, we might not have the best thing right now, but we have something that we can start with, and we can continuously improve as we get feedback from people, and as people, use it and find little quirks in it, and that makes it not workable. Okay, so we're saying, okay, we'll receive that and we'll adjust accordingly. But I mean, it's been 1997
No, it's a long
since
time.
anybody has had anything, and so I mean, if we wait a whole nother year, I'm thinking.
No, but I agree that I'd like for, and the idea of, many times what happens when you come to support groups like this is you'll have people come in and out and they'll say, I have this problem and I have this problem, and they may never come back. Or we'll say to them, well, you need to go to this person and say blah, 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 do this, that, and the other. Well, I don't want to do that because then the person downtown might take, might retaliate against my
Retaliate, right.
child. So I'm not going to raise a stink, but, you have a whole different group of people who sometimes will come to the support group and tell everybody here what's going on, who will never go back to the school level and try to push for exactly what needs to change. And so when you have a group like us, where we're all like, well, I can tell you about a student in a certain district who didn't get identified and that the school never referred for special education services until the parent went and got a medical diagnosis.
I know it.
And
The truth is, I know it.
Last 12 months it happened. I'm just saying, but.
And that's what this document, and so, I mean, I get it. We need to have all eyes, we need to have all input, I get it, trust me. And I like the idea of having it on the website and inviting people to take a look at it. What I don't like is saying, well, we're not gonna do nothing until everybody's taking a look at it. Because if we say that, then I'm like, oh man, I mean, these people.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
So when I email you later,
Yeah.
you're not gonna just put it in the trash?
No. Come over your house and eat dinner.
I don't think you wanna eat at my house. They had Dairy Queen grilled cheese and French fries.
That's my kind of meal.
What I would like to see, though, is that if there's a school 2 years down the road that had all these difficulties, I don't want to see the same issues 2 years later at the same school.
Right. And so, as I said, what we're seeing with the ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act, that is replacing the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, ESSA waiver, which No Child Left Behind required schools to perform at a particular level. schools were not performing at the appropriate level. So the president provided a waiver for district, because if schools didn't perform at a particular level, that meant the dollars were affected. So the president provided a waiver to districts or to states and said, if you will have a teacher evaluation policy, and if you will have a teacher evaluation, if you will have a professional learning policy to make sure appropriate professional learning opportunities are there. If teachers will include student growth as a measure of their effectiveness, the degree to which students grow as a measure of the, because usually you just go in and observe, the principal observes, meets, and we'll see you next year. But the ESEA waiver said that we'll continue to provide the support, the federal support, if you include these factors in your accountability model for your state. So Kentucky got a waiver. So when you hear parents complaining, and not parents, but teachers complaining, and districts complaining, and people complaining about the professional growth and effectiveness system, well, this effectiveness system is attempting to do just what you said, is to identify where the weak areas are and provide the professional learning so that that area won't remain weak. So we did that for 2 years, and now this year, it came out this year under President Obama, but it will begin in 17. There's a new accountability model being developed for the state. And there are people who are working in work groups to develop that model. Now, one of the questions Melanie asked, because she heard one of the senators from Tennessee or somewhere come up here and tell us all that they're doing, is who is going to be providing support for our population as the new accountability model is being developed. And so the commissioner put together work groups in different aspects of the ESSA accountability model. And on the work groups that I think is one of the leads, I decided to pull this up. Hold on for a second. So, our commissioners, Pruitt, he did he went around the state, did town hall meetings, talked to people to determine what should our accountability in the state look like. This is to answer our question so that we won't have the same problem in the school. The same schools have the same problem. And people provided feedback, and from that feedback, they set up accountability groups in different areas. How many of you go to the KDE website at all to just so you've kept up with what's
I don't like that website.
it is hard to maneuver, and but it's getting better.
I hope so.
But I'm gonna tell you the best way to maneuver it. Anything you're looking for, go to search. Don't depend on.
Yeah, the menus are bad.
Yeah.
That's what I'm frustrated about. I want to use the
Because that's what I do.
And I gave up and started doing the search. I was like, where is everything?
I just call them and they tell me where to go and
Yeah.
where to find them.
Or
Well,
email me and I'll be glad to put a link to it. That's the best way. But
They
if
probably
you,
know me.
if you're trying to find it on your own, it can be, I mean, you have to be,
Are you in Frankfurt or?
I'm in Frankfurt. And my email is there. I don't have, I don't have cards because we just moved to a new building. I don't know why I'm out. So I'm gonna have to do this.
Well, this manual sounds like a tool that has a lot of potential, so.
Well, what we'd like for you to know is that if it doesn't, then tell us, because what we want you to know is that we are responsive to you. Don't feel that, oh, I'm here and I can't do anything and then nobody, you know. I know the frustration, trust me. I know that you've had people finagling with your kids and trying to figure it out and acting like they know and they didn't know. And you know, I know I've talked to too many parents. But I also know that there is at least a spirit of partnership between the Kentucky Department of Education and not only the districts, but with the parents and families of these children, because we know that you can provide for us the strengths, the weaknesses, the needs of the kid way better than we can in trying to assess it. And so we trust that. As a parent who worked with kids who had various disabilities, the only way I could provide effective, even the research-based intervention is less effective the less I know about the child and the child's family. The less I mean, even if I use the research-based, the more I know, and what I did as a teacher is I came to your house and I want to sit down and talk to you and I want to know your heart and I want you to know my heart, because at the end of the day I'm going to be calling you and telling you either great news or not so great news, and I want you to know that that conversation is not out of the lack of will, but it's out of, we're doing the best we can. Typically, and what I found is, it's not hard to come up with great news, and number two, great news is not difficult. But great news is not always, typically when you get a phone call about things that's, there are great things happening all the time, daily. So great news is not difficult. Essentially, effective news, it's not hard. But it has to be the intent of the provider to do that, and it takes a heart. I want to give you some names of people who are working on the work groups. I don't know why my arrow is showing up there and not on here. I'm going to try something else. Here we go. Okay, here we go. It's on here. So, come on.
Went to sleep.
Yeah.
While you're fixing that, I just wanted to say, I think sometimes when some of us who might be having a reputation as trying to cause trouble or something, that really we're just trying to help the children.
Who knows that better than me?
I'm just saying that we're, even though like one of mine is out of school, my son is a senior this year, but and he's my youngest, but that doesn't mean, I know that there's just gonna be more and more kids on the spectrum coming through, and so many times we hear similar stories as children go through different stages of their education, and I think everybody just wants to.
And I think that what addresses that best is my relation, as when I was a school teacher, at least, when I worked in the building, is my relationship with you. That you knew that I meant, and if I didn't know, I didn't ever purport to be, the guru of all knowledge. But I did say to a parent that if I don't know, I'm going to find out for you. And we're going to walk through this together, and we're going to get to the bottom. We're going to figure this out together. But unfortunately, that's not always the case, and so you have people who are challenged with the perceived wall that the school provides, and so they feel like they have to be strong, and they do, they should, and sometimes they're perceived as being too strong. But I mean, I commend anyone who is advocating for their child.
And I think what's really neat about our group is that, you just think about all the people that are here tonight, the ones that can't come because they have a child just like ours, but they don't have transportation, maybe they're working the night shift, maybe, they're the main caregiver, that kind of thing. And I think I hope and pray that's the population I worry so much about, because just seeing some of the folks that we get a chance to interact with just by living our lives, there are people that are doing an amazing job with very challenging children in very challenging school environments, and just making sure that as you move forward, you're being inclusive of those folks as well. As does that make sense? Because not everybody is middle class. Not every we're all different, and so we need to be kind of scooping everybody up as we move down the road and making sure we're taking care of those folks.
And looking out for each other. Because at the end of the day, I mean, I don't benefit, as I said, I was making a Toyota living in a Toyota house, and a Toyota dog. But none of that's nothing if I'm not contributing. He barks on cue.
That's great.
But none of that is not, okay, so you have that, but what does that mean when you look out and your brother or your sister is hurting? What benefit is that? And some people it doesn't have a problem with it, but I did, and I couldn't do it.
One of the things to keep in mind too is that the DSM manual keeps changing the definitions. So you've got people that were diagnosed a few years ago and they have one diagnosis, and then you've got this, and so that adds to the complexity of the living document that you're talking about.
Yeah, and that's the reason why the document has to remain living. That's the reason why a diagnosis, DSM diagnosis, has nothing to do with eligibility. You can be diagnosed or you cannot be diagnosed and be eligible. And so that's one of the reasons why that's the case. I don't know why my screen isn't showing these names, but I want to show you these names.
Another benefit, I don't know how everyone, I don't want to bring up a sore topic here, but the Common Core. The Common Core, people have different opinions about that, but it generally was developed by, people, that weren't part of the grassroots effort, not local and everything, and so some of the issues that have come forth from that have been from bureaucracy now instead of, people that are going to be affected by it up, so.
That whole issue
we don't want to
is,
repeat some things from that.
Right. I get it. I hear exactly what you're saying.
A lot of people have some
Um,
strong feelings about that.
Yeah, I know.
There are some people who are like, I hate that. I'm going, wow.
Yeah, so.
You know, I think
But how
that,
it was developed is the thing that we don't wanna repeat some things.
well, we got, in roughly 50 minutes, there's gonna be a debate on television.
I have to run home.